So a couple things that we're seeing with Google as this is beginning to set in, as we've got a pretty heavy rate of automation and freeing these engineers up. The first is distributed teams. As we take out a lot of the more mechanical, a lot of the more analytical type work from the engineers, we're able to better distribute teams geographically. So one of the interesting bits of research that we come back with is, as we have teams spread across the globe, what we find is those teams are still highly effective, even working from San Francisco, from New York, from Singapore, and London, based on two variables. If the team has been in place and knows each other and trusts each other for 6 to 12 months, and the work that they're doing hasn't changed significantly, you pay no penalty, no productivity penalty for having that team distributed. It's when the team doesn't know each other, they haven't built up that trust, or the processes and the type of work that they're doing is constantly changing, that's when you pay a pretty heavy penalty for that kind of work. So here's the interesting thing to think about, and we were talking about this before lunch for San Luis Obispo. The benefit that a city like this has in interacting with large tech centers, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's San Francisco Bay Area and Seattle, the power of cities like this is you can begin to build up teams that have just a 3-hour, 2-hour commute to a lot of the large global tech companies. And so what we're hoping to be able to see is these pockets of teams spread around the world, because if they are within a couple hours of travel, when you have those meetings where you need to have everybody in the same area, you're going to want to have those teams in cities that are close by. The San Luis Obispos, the Sacramentos, and such. And the other thing to think about is, as your companies are setting up remote sites, be very cognizant of the type of work that's being done. Is it static or is it dynamic? Do the teams know each other? Do they have a history of working together frequently, or is it coming together? When you're in that very early stage where the team is still building trust, where you're in that very early stage where the process is still forming, you're going to need those teams to work together a lot more frequently. And again, back to the principles of machine learning automation, because a lot of the mechanical work, because a lot of the more mundane type work, you can offload into automation. What you're left with is the more human element, the more collaborative element. And that, especially in the early stage, is going to be a lot more plane tickets, a lot more hotel stays. Just be willing to invest in early stage as that team is coming up to speed on a lot of FaceTime. Second one is thoughtful space design. One of the things my team is working on right now is how to make teams more interactive, more collaborative, and more productive based on space. And so one of the things that we've given a lot of thought to, and when you go back, look around your office, the type of work that people are going to be doing 5 to 10 years from now is much less heads down than it is right now, and certainly than it was 5 to 10 years ago. As we see the workforce shifting to more creative type work, more collaborative type work, the spaces probably need to change. 20 years ago, as long as you had a cube where an engineer could come in, go heads down, and write code, she was good to go. That no longer works as well. That heads down, rule-based type work, 5 to 10 years from now, most of that's going to be gone. And so what we're beginning to do is to give a lot of thought to spaces, to how we set up something as simple as a desk setting to drive a lot more collaboration. My team does a lot of testing. I was just in New York City, where we actually pilot different types of space design. We reach out to engineers, we say, hey, would you be willing to run an experiment for 30 days for us to see if we can just move things around and get a boost in productivity? And the principle that you're going to want to be thinking about, especially 5, 10, 15 years, is not so much can that individual get her work done, but have you set her up an environment where she can collaborate heavily with other people. It's getting more complex as well. We used to work very much in silos where everybody had the same vocabulary, everybody had the same principles, everybody had the same set of assumptions. There's going to be a lot more cross-functional work going on, which drives the need for much stronger people management and much better culture management. The reason, the data that we see over and over is that people join companies, but they lead managers. And so when you think about where you're going to make investments, when you think about bringing your people up to speed, it's really your people managers that you're going to want to spend the most time with. Because again, when we think about the future of work, it's very much a shift away from that employee coming in, going heads down on work for 8 hours, leaving and getting a paycheck. That type of work is getting automated. The type of work that's going to be left is the highly collaborative, interacting with other people. Especially as you're beginning to cross different types of organizations, different types of cultures, you get conflict. And that's where a strong people manager comes in. So as you're thinking about developing talent, as you're thinking about where to invest in your talent, the people management becomes critical. The last thing is on culture. I mentioned that there is a concern on there's going to be heavy depression of wages. However, the paradox is companies are still going to have a lot of trouble hiring. You're going to have this very strange, and this is consistent. Google sees this, Bain sees this, McKinsey sees this. You're going to have this strange paradox where you're going to have suppression of wages and high unemployment, but companies still will not be able to hire enough people. That's where the culture piece becomes so important. The rates of attrition that we're beginning to see and the amount of time that employees spend at companies, attrition is rising, and the tenure of time at companies is dropping. This is where an investment in culture with you as business leaders becomes absolutely important, especially with the younger millennial generation coming up. The importance of culture, of wanting to have impact, of wanting to be able to change the world, that's how you're going to hang on to your employees. The days of somebody coming and joining a company and staying there just a base loyalty, that's beginning to dissipate. And so when you think as a leader about your organization, having a very strong, visible culture, allowing that stickiness for people to stay is going to be absolutely critical.